All right, let's unpack this right from the very beginning. Let's dive into a concept that might sound straightforward on the surface. Government business enterprises, or GBEs. When you hear government business, you might think, okay, a business run by the government. Simple enough. Seems logical.
But our case study reveals there's a crucial, often missed distinction. It proves even the simplest concepts can hide, well, some pretty deep misunderstandings.
Yeah, and what those with a truly comprehensive grasp understood was that simply saying a GBE is run by the government is it's too vague.
Right.
It lacks that essential precision. The defining characteristic, the absolute core of what makes a GBE, is that it is owned by the government.
Owned, not just run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this isn't just semantics, right? Ownership implies direct control, full accountability for its performance, and ultimately its strategic direction. It's a fundamental difference from, say, a private company that merely operates a service for the government under contract. That's a different setup entirely.
I see. So ownership is the key.
It is. And furthermore, a GBE isn't just about providing a general public service like a public library or a park, which typically operate on tax revenue alone. The primary objective of a GBE is often to act as a source of revenue for the government.
Ah, okay. So they're meant to make money, or at least break even.
Precisely. They aim to be profitable, or at least self-sustaining, generating financial returns that can be reinvested into public services or the broader economy, much like a private corporation would, but with those profits channeled back to the state.
That's fascinating. It really highlights how a single word, owned versus operated, can completely change the picture.
It really does. And what's revealing here is how that one word shifts your whole understanding and consequently how you'd analyze the entity. We saw many people, and certainly many responses, tend to confuse GBEs with social enterprises.
Okay, I can see how that might happen. They both serve the public in some way.
They might, yeah. But their fundamental drivers are entirely different. A social enterprise explicitly prioritizes social or environmental objectives first. Profit is secondary, often just a means to that end, something to be reinvested. GBEs, on the other hand, are primarily designed to generate revenue for the government. Their social or public service aspect is often a byproduct of their commercial operation, not its main mission.
Got it. Social mission first versus revenue mission first.
Exactly. So that distinction between operated by and owned by is absolutely critical. If a private entity operates a government service, it's driven by its own shareholder profit motive within the contract terms. But if the government owns the enterprise, it directly sets the strategic priorities. It influences pricing. It's ultimately accountable for successes and failures. This has huge legal, structural, and operational implications. It dictates everything from investment decisions to, how quickly they can adapt to market changes. When you're analyzing a GBE, you're looking at a very different beast from a pure private competitor. It demands a unique analytical lens.
That really brings us to a crucial takeaway, doesn't it? For any concept you encounter, when defining a term, try to go beyond the surface. Start with a simple, clear definition, sure, but then peel back the layers. Add a detail or two that shows you understand the deeper, more nuanced implications. It's like describing a car. You could start by saying, it's a vehicle with 4 wheels. Accurate, but basic.
Right. Doesn't tell you much.
Exactly. To show real understanding, you'd add something like, that typically uses an internal combustion engine for propulsion, is designed for road travel, and is primarily used for personal transport. That extra layer transforms a simple statement into a much richer insight. Okay, let's move to our next challenge. This one takes us into the often sensitive area of employee rights during a really tough time for any business: redundancy. This scenario really shines a light on the crucial difference between what a business is legally obligated to do versus what it might choose to do to support its employees. It seems like an area where entitlements and transition issues can get easily mixed up.
Very easily mixed up. It's a major point of confusion.
So the most insightful responses, they showed a really crystal clear differentiation. They understood that entitlement issues refer strictly to what an employee is legally owed when their position is made redundant under the law. We're talking about the non-negotiables, right? Things like a redundancy payout, usually calculated based on how long the employee worked there.
Yep, based on years of service.
And payment for any accrued wages and unused leave, annual leave, long service leave, that sort of thing. Stuff that's legally mandated. And the top performers didn't just list these, they explicitly tied them back to the case study. So for the Film's AU example, they'd say something specific like, a redundancy package is a sum of money paid to redundant employees based on their years of service to Film SAU. They applied the principle directly.
Exactly. And the deeper challenge here, the really critical question is, Why is it absolutely vital for businesses to understand and meticulously differentiate between these entitlements and what we call transition issues? We saw a major pitfall where many responses incorrectly listed transition issues as if they were entitlements.
Like what kind of things?
Things like job search assistance, maybe help with writing resumes, career counseling, even financial planning advice. Now, those are all incredibly valuable support measures, no question. A compassionate business might offer them to ease the transition, recognizing the human impact. But they are not legal entitlements in the same way a redundancy payout or unused leave is.
Okay, so one's a must-do, the other's a nice-to-do, essentially.
In legal terms, yes. One is a legal obligation, the other is supportive help. Another common error was mentioning unpaid sick leave as an entitlement in redundancy payouts. That's generally not the case unless it's some specific accrued leave payout defined in an agreement. And getting this wrong, well, a business risks not only legal noncompliance, which can lead to costly lawsuits and fines, but also severe reputational damage.
I can see that. How you treat people on the way out says a lot.
It says a huge amount. It profoundly impacts the morale and productivity of the remaining workforce. And it definitely affects your ability to attract top talent in the future. Mismanaging this can lead to things like quiet quitting among the survivors, or make it really hard to hire good people later on. It can cripple long-term growth for perceived short-term savings. So for anyone managing these critical employee transitions, a mental checklist is just absolutely vital. First, describe the entitlement with precision. What exactly is legally owed? Second, link it directly and explicitly to the specific business and situation you're talking about. And third, crucially, double-check that you're not mistakenly describing a supportive transition issue as a legal entitlement. That last distinction is where so many businesses and analyses tend to stumble.
Okay, now let's put ourselves in the manager's shoes. You're facing one of the toughest conversations imaginable, delivering bad news, specifically telling employees about redundancy. Your communication style in this moment. It's not just about being polite, is it? It's about being profoundly effective and clear in an incredibly difficult situation. The question here asks us to propose an appropriate management style for this and justify why, using specific features, but which style actually works here and what's the thinking behind it?
Well, the most insightful responses recognize something important. When a decision as significant as redundancy has already been made, the appropriate styles tend to be more management-centered. They correctly chose styles like Persuasive or Consultative.
Okay, let's break those down a bit in this context. Persuasive.
A persuasive style here isn't about debating the decision itself. That ship has sailed. It's about explaining the rationale, trying to sell the necessity of the decision to hopefully reduce resentment and gain some acceptance, even if it's a reluctant acceptance. The decision is final.
Got it. And consultative, that sounds like asking for input.
It does. But in this specific context, it's usually about seeking input on how to implement the decision most effectively, or perhaps how best to support the affected employees. Maybe through things like reskilling programs or job search help. It's not about consulting on whether the redundancy happens or who is impacted. That's already decided.
Right, the what is decided, the how might have some room for input.
Exactly. And the response is really shown when they justify their choice using features like centralized decision-making, emphasizing the decision came from higher up and wasn't up for debate at this stage. They also often mention one-way communication, meaning the flow is primarily from management to employees, focused on informing clearly, not opening a negotiation about the core decision. The crucial focus for those who got it right was justifying the style for informing about a done deal.
That makes sense. If you use the wrong style and say something too participative,
oh, that would be disastrous. Choosing the wrong style in such a sensitive, high-stakes situation can inflict severe, lasting damage on employee trust and morale, even if the decision itself was unavoidable. A common and significant error we saw was exactly that. Choosing styles like participative management that imply negotiation. That's completely unsuitable when the decision is final.
that just creates false hope, right?
Also breeds resentment, makes the whole emotional impact worse. And often, the core challenge was failing to link the specific features of the chosen style back to why it's appropriate for informing about redundancy when the decision is already made. If a manager presents a final, non-negotiable decision as if it's still open for discussion, it doesn't just create confusion, it completely erodes their credibility. It makes the situation feel chaotic and, frankly, misleading.
So, for anyone facing that awful task of delivering tough news or making these hard decisions, there's a key takeaway here. Always think about the specific nature of the task. Why, for instance, is a persuasive style often a decent choice for this redundancy conversation?
Well, as the analysis suggests, it allows the manager to clearly articulate the why behind the difficult decision, to sell the rationale. This can proactively address some questions and concerns, maybe reduce some resentment, foster a degree of understanding, all while maintaining clear control over the fact that the decision is made. It's about clarity, managing expectations, not inviting a debate that can't go anywhere productive.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Let's talk about the very engine room of any business. It's operations. Every business, whether it's, building houses or brewing coffee, has overarching objectives. And its operations department is the heart that drives them forward. But how directly do they connect? This next business challenge asked us to explain the precise relationship between operations management and a specific objective. Fulfilling a market need. Can you really draw that direct line from production to purpose?
Yeah, and the best responses did this brilliantly. They started by clearly defining the objective itself, fulfilling a market need. You need to know what target you're aiming for first.
Sets the context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then they explicitly laid out how operations management, through its systematic focus on transforming inputs into outputs, directly enables the achievement of this objective. That's the bedrock function, right? Taking raw materials, labor, technology, whatever the inputs are, and converting them efficiently into the products or services that customers actually demand, that the market needs.
Making the thing people want.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And they didn't just leave it abstract. They brought it to life with a specific tangible example from the big construction case study. They explained how sourcing high-quality timber, a crucial input combined with efficient construction processes, directly contributes to fulfilling the market need for new houses. It shows that clear cause and effect.
It's interesting because without that clear link, it feels a bit floaty, doesn't it?
It really does. Without that explicit causal link, the understanding stays frustratingly superficial. It's not enough to just say, operations does stuff for the business. Many responses actually missed the critical first step, defining the specified objective. They jumped into talking about profit maximization, for instance, when the question clearly asked about fulfilling a market need. That shows a crucial misreading right from the start.
Reading the question carefully matters.
Always. Others might have mentioned an operations strategy like ordering inputs, but they didn't connect it explicitly to the broader goal of fulfilling that specific market need. They knew what operations did, maybe, but not why it did it in service of that particular objective. It's about illustrating the whole chain. These operational activities produce these outputs, which then fulfill this market demand. That depth is what separates real business insight from just describing things.
Okay, so a pivotal takeaway here seems to be, always read the question or the challenge you're facing meticulously. Make sure you address all its parts with precision. Define the objective first. Then, clearly explain the role of operations in that context. And finally, nail it down by explicitly connecting the two with a specific, tangible example from the case study or the real-world scenario. Make that link undeniable. Now, when one part of a business has a hiccup, it rarely stays contained, does it? It often creates a cascade, a ripple effect that touches other areas. Our next scenario really illustrates this, how a seemingly contained problem in operations can throw off your key performance indicators, your KPIs, those crucial metrics telling you how well things are going. The challenge was specific. How does an operations problem, like not having enough inputs, affect a KPI?
Right. And the most insightful responses picked a highly relevant KPI, something like the rate of productivity growth. And they started by accurately defining it's a measure of efficiency, basically, getting more output from the same inputs over time, or maybe the same output with fewer inputs.
Doing more with less, essentially.
Exactly. Then they meticulously detailed the logical step-by-step cause and effect chain. If a company like big construction has fewer inputs, say not enough timber for their projects, what happens? Well, it directly leads to delays in finishing construction. That means you have idle workers who can't do their jobs effectively.
Standing around costs money.
Absolutely. That idleness and delay inevitably leads to increased costs. You're still paying wages, overheads, but without the corresponding production. All of these factors then demonstrably negatively impact productivity growth. You're getting less output for your input costs and time. And the really top responses reinforce this by using terms directly from the case study timber construction service, grounding their explanation specifically in big construction's world.
This feels like a perfect example of analytical thinking, doesn't it? Dissecting a problem and tracing its real impact.
It's exactly that. It's about understanding those interdependencies. The most common weakness we saw was simply stating productivity will go down, full stop, without the crucial why and how. It's not enough just to name the KPI. You have to elaborate on the detailed logical steps connecting the operational problem to the KPI's decline. Why are inputs critical? Because without them, production stops, workers are idle, deadlines slip, the whole process becomes inefficient. This directly hits how much value you generate per unit of input, the essence of productivity.
And this applies everywhere, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine insufficient customer service staff an input issue. That leads to longer wait times, an operational problem, which directly impacts customer satisfaction scores, a KPI, which then correlates to customer retention, another KPI, which ultimately hits revenue. Understanding these chains is fundamental for leaders because KPIs aren't just numbers. They're the dashboard telling you where the problems are and where the opportunities lie. So for anyone tackling a KPI-related challenge, here's a really solid framework. Start with a clear, solid definition of the KPI itself. Then use the specific information from your case study of the company, its products, its challenges, to build that logical chain of reasoning. Show, step by step, exactly how the problem or decision ripples through to affect that KPI. Think of it like telling a story. Problem A leads to consequence B, which inevitably impacts KPI C.
Okay, let's talk growth. Every business, from a tiny startup to a giant corporation, wants to grow, right? But how do you strategically tap into new opportunities, especially within your home market? It's rarely just about doing more of the same or only focusing on tiny efficiencies. This next challenge asked for a compelling business strategy to seize domestic opportunities, justified with a clear benefit, and linked back to the case study.
Yeah, and the responses that really nailed this proposed a specific, ambitious strategy like diversification, instead of suggesting something purely tactical like finding a new, cheaper supplier for timber, which, okay, might help with costs, but isn't really a growth strategy in itself.
Right, that's optimizing, not necessarily growing the scope.
Precisely. They suggested expanding big construction's operational scope. For example, explaining how diversification, perhaps by expanding into commercial buildings instead of just focusing on residential homes, would open up entirely new markets for big construction. That signals a real strategic shift. Then, they provided a clear, measurable justification, linking it to a specific benefit like an improved percentage of market share or sales. By moving into commercial construction, big construction could capture a whole new segment, directly boosting both market share and sales revenue. That shows tangible, impactful growth.
That really highlights the difference between just tweaking things and making a strategic move, doesn't it?
It really does. And it brings us to that critical question. How does a business elevate its thinking beyond tactical adjustments to true strategic growth? Many responses here were just too generic, or they lack that necessary ambition, suggesting finding a new supplier is an operational adjustment, may be useful, but it's not a strategy to seize domestic opportunities for major growth in the way the challenge implied. True growth strategies usually involve expanding the business's reach, its product lines, maybe its customer base, something fundamentally new or bigger. Exactly. Yeah. Furthermore, many struggle to explicitly connect their proposed strategy to a specific, measurable benefit and then link that benefit back to the business's overall goals. That connection is absolutely critical for demonstrating strategic thinking. And, while diversification sounds great in new revenue, less reliance on one market, it has risks too, right? Expanding into commercial buildings means big construction needs new expertise, maybe new equipment, new competitors.
To stretch them too thin?
Could definitely stretch them too thin, maybe lose focus on their core residential business. A really thorough analysis would probably touch on those trade-offs as well.
So for anyone thinking about business growth strategies, the pro tip seems to be, think beyond the obvious operational tweaks. Consider truly strategic shifts like diversification. And make absolutely sure your justification includes a specific tangible benefit like increasing market share, boosting sales, reducing risks, and draw a clear, undeniable line back to the specific business in your case study. All right, let's think for a moment about a service you've used recently. Maybe getting a haircut, grabbing a coffee, or even getting some professional advice, legal or otherwise. Now consider this. How is the production of that service fundamentally different from making a physical thing, like assembling a car or building a phone? This next challenge asks us to explain a defining characteristic of a service business's operations system.
Right, and the most insightful responses really zeroed in on those essential defining characteristics of services. They often highlighted that the final product is intangible, meaning you can't physically hold it, you can't store it, you can't inventory a haircut or a legal opinion or the experience of drinking that coffee. It exists only at the moment it's delivered or consumed.
Can't put advice on a shelf.
Exactly. Or they accurately discussed how production and consumption occur simultaneously. You receive your coffee as the barista is making it. Your hair is styled as the hairdresser is cutting it. You get legal advice as the lawyer is providing it. And the best responses didn't just state these, they elaborated. They used examples like a cafe to show how the service is often tailored to the customer's needs in real time because of this simultaneous production and consumption. The customer is often directly involved in the process.
That simultaneous part seems really key. It changes everything.
It absolutely does. And what's illuminating here is that it's not enough just to know the buzzwords like intangible or simultaneous. You have to grasp the why behind them and their practical implications for managing the operation. Many responses relied on vague statements or even inaccurate generalizations. For instance, a common mistake was claiming that all service businesses are inherently labor-intensive.
Which isn't always true.
Not always. Think about an airline. Yes, there's human interaction, but the flight service itself is incredibly capital-intensive. Huge planes, complex IT, infrastructure, or think about an automated customer service phone line, minimal labor there. These counterexamples show why true understanding matters more than just memorizing phrases. Intangibility means you can't build up inventory during slow times, requiring different capacity management strategies. Simultaneous production and consumption mean quality control often happens during the service delivery, making customer interaction and employee training absolutely critical, unlike a factory where you can inspect products afterwards. So a straightforward but powerful framework for analyzing service businesses. Don't just list a characteristic, explain what it actually means in practical operational terms, and then solidify your understanding with a specific concrete example. If you say a service is intangible, explain that means you can't hold it or stock it. Give an example like a flight or a consultation, and maybe contrast it with a physical product.
Okay, let's talk performance reviews. Appraisals. Often seen as just, a management chore, maybe even something employees dread. But can they actually be a genuine win-win? Can they truly help both the business and the individual employee? This next scenario explored exactly that, asking how a strategy like appraisals can achieve both a business objective and an employee objective.
Yeah, this is a great one. The most insightful responses started with a solid definition of a performance appraisal itself, a formal, systematic assessment of an employee's job performance over time, usually involving feedback, discussing strengths and weaknesses, setting future goals. Then, they meticulously linked relevant, distinct objectives for both sides. For an employee, this might be tangible things like higher wages or promotions, or maybe less tangible things like career development or just feeling more satisfied in their job.
And for the business?
For the business, it could be increased profit, maybe better customer satisfaction, improved efficiency, lower turnover. But the really brilliant part was the logical explanation of how the appraisal process, specifically by giving targeted feedback and a clear path for improvement, could lead to achieving both.
Okay, give me an example.
Sure. An appraisal might identify specific ways an employee can improve their customer service skills. Following through on that improved customer service could directly lead to more tips or commissions for the employee hitting their personal objective. And at the same time, it leads to more sales and higher customer retention for the business, hitting the business objective. It shows that synergy perfectly. Individual improvement fuels organizational success.
That really gets to the heart of good management, doesn't it? Aligning individual goals with the company's goals.
It absolutely does. It raises that deep question. How do you design systems that genuinely align individual aspirations with organizational goals? Performance appraisals, when done well, are a prime example. A common misstep we saw was confusing appraisals with other motivational tactics, like just giving out rewards or recognition, which don't necessarily have that same structured feedback, development planning, and goal-setting element.
Right, an appraisal is more comprehensive.
Exactly. And interestingly, many responses found it harder to articulate the employee benefit side of the equation. They often focus heavily on how the business gains. That highlights a potential gap in understanding that truly effective management strategies need to be reciprocal. They have to create value for both the individual and the organization. It's not just about getting more out of people. It's about fostering growth, keeping good employees, and having a motivated workforce that wants the company to succeed.
So, for anyone designing or using performance management systems, the pro tip seems to be, when a strategy needs to connect to multiple objectives, make sure you address each one separately and clearly. Don't just lump them together. Use strong linking words. This can lead to HARO as a direct result. Equally consequently, to really show the connection and the logical flow of how the strategy impacts each objective individually and then together. Build that story of mutual benefit. Okay, conflict. It happens in pretty much any workplace, right? It's almost inevitable when people work together. But how do you handle it formally, step by step, before small disagreements blow up into major problems or require external intervention? That's where grievance procedures come in. Our next scenario asked us to explain a grievance procedure, specifically in the context of a common issue: increased working hours.
Right. And the best responses correctly identified a grievance procedure as a formal internal process for resolving disputes. That definition is key. It highlights the structure, and crucially, the initial focus on resolving things inside the organization first. They then outlined a clear, logical sequence of steps, applying them meticulously to the increased working hours issue. Typically, it starts with the least formal step, the employee speaking directly with their manager, raising concerns about the hours, seeking an initial resolution right there.
Just talk about it first.
Exactly. If that conversation doesn't fix it, the process might escalate, perhaps to involving human resources who can offer guidance, maybe mediate, or look into it further. Still not resolved. It could go to a more senior manager or someone higher up. Only if all internal attempts fail would the process typically move externally, maybe involving a third party like the Fair Work Commission for mediation or arbitration as a last resort. The key, for those who really got it, was linking every step clearly and consistently back to the specific issue of increased working hours, showing how the procedure addresses that particular conflict systematically.
It's interesting that the focus is so much on internal resolution first.
It really is. And what's illuminating is that emphasis. A common pitfall we saw was responses immediately jumping to mediation or arbitration, the external methods completely skipping the crucial internal steps. This highlights a lack of understanding of organizational health, really. Effective organizations prioritize solving issues within their own structure whenever possible. Why?
Keeps relationships intact, saves time and money.
Both. It helps preserve working relationships, maintains the organization's autonomy, and avoids the often significant costs and time involved in external processes. A well-designed grievance procedure allows for early intervention, often stopping minor issues from festering into major disputes. It's about empowering employees to raise concerns constructively and providing a clear, trusted pathway for resolution. It fosters a healthier internal climate. So for anyone looking at dispute resolution, a fundamental principle: remember, a grievance procedure is a process, a series of steps. When you describe it, list the steps logically. Start with the least formal, most direct internal step, talking to the manager. Then move systematically through more formal internal steps. Only consider external resolution if and when those internal avenues have genuinely been exhausted.
Okay, the workplace. It's more than just managers and employees, isn't it? There's a whole cast of characters, other players with specific roles, influencing everything from wages to safety. Who are they and what exactly do they do? This next challenge asked for a detailed description of 2 relevant participants in the workplace.
Yeah, and the strongest responses picked 2 specific participants who hold significant sway, like employer associations and unions, and then provided a description that went way beyond just a simple definition. For employer associations, they explained their multiple roles, how they provide advice to businesses on industrial relations, how they represent employer interests in bargaining with unions, how they lobby government on policy, and even offer training and support to their member companies.
So representing the business side.
Exactly. And for unions, they detailed their essential function: protecting and advancing employee rights and interests, advocating for better wages, conditions, job security, organizing collective bargaining, industrial action like strikes if necessary, and representing individual members in disputes. They highlighted the proactive nature of these roles in the whole industrial relations system.
It sounds like using specific terms is really important here, rather than just saying the boss or the workers.
Absolutely. The more precisely you can identify and describe these various roles, the clearer and more sophisticated your understanding of the complex workplace ecosystem becomes. A common weakness was using overly generic terms like manager or owner. While they are roles, they aren't specific participants in the same way that, say, a human resources manager with specific responsibilities or the Fair Work Commission with actual legal powers are. The Fair Work Commission, for example, is an independent tribunal. It can conciliate disputes, make legally binding decisions, set minimum standards. Understanding these specific actors and their functions is crucial for anyone navigating workplace dynamics. It helps you anticipate actions, negotiate effectively, ensure compliance.
So when asked to describe participants, the tip is to think about their purpose.
Exactly. Think. What is their primary role? Who do they represent? Employers, employees, the public interest, and what specific actions do they take or what powers do they have to fulfill that purpose. That moves you from just naming them to truly understanding their influence.
All right, here's where we shift from just describing to really analyzing. What happens when a core issue, like staff absenteeism, starts to pull apart a business's goals? This final challenge in this section used that powerful command term, analyze. Explain how increased staff absenteeism would impact a business objective.
Yes, analysis is the key word here. The most insightful responses started by clearly defining staff absenteeism, basically. Employees being away from work without permission or valid reason beyond their normal leave. Then, and this is the absolute core of analysis, they constructed a detailed, logical cause and effect chain. They showed the negative impact on a common business objective like profit maximization. It wasn't just profit goes down. No, the analysis meticulously traced the sequence. Higher absenteeism directly leads to not enough staff available to fill orders or serve customers effectively.
Okay, the immediate impact.
Right. This consequently means lower productivity across the board because you have fewer people, or the people there are stretched thin, maybe doing unfamiliar jobs. This cascade then results in potentially unfulfilled customer demands or a drop in service quality, which in turn leads to lost sales as frustrated customers go elsewhere or lose confidence. And ultimately, this entire chain culminates in lower profit for the business. They were rigorous, using those linking phrases, "this leads to," as a direct result, consequently, to really hammer home the logical flow. And crucially, they linked it back to the specific case study context where possible.
It's fascinating how often analysts gets confused with just describe.
It really is. Analysis is fundamentally about demonstrating relationships, consequences, implications, showing how one factor systematically influences another in a causal chain. Many responses just define the KPI and the objective, but missed that detailed logical chain of reasoning. Some also misunderstood analyze itself, thinking it meant listing pros and cons, which is totally irrelevant here.
So analysis is about the how and the why of the connection.
Precisely. It goes beyond stating facts. It builds a coherent argument tracing an issue through its effects, revealing the interconnectedness of operational problems and strategic outcomes. This isn't just academic. In the real world, understanding these impact chains is vital for solving problems and planning effectively. So for anyone facing an analyze command, here's the mindset. Immediately shift to thinking about the intricate relationships between concepts. How does one thing lead to another? Don't just state a fact, explain its implications. And critically, use those linking phrases, those verbal bridges, to clearly show the logical flow of your argument, demonstrating you understand the cascading effects.
Okay, this is the big one now. Leading a business through significant change. It's hard. It's often messy. And sometimes leaders feel they need to use what are called high-risk strategies to push that change through. But are these always the right call? And how do you even evaluate their true impact, not just short-term compliance, but the long-term health of the business? This was a comprehensive challenge asking us to evaluate the use of high-risk strategies during change using a contemporary business case study.
Yeah, this required pulling a lot together. And what really set apart the best responses was their choice of a relevant, real-world, and importantly, contemporary case study. The report mentioned Aldi's ambitious plastic reduction goal as a great example.
Why contemporary? Does that matter?
It matters because it makes the analysis grounded and current. Aldi's plastic goal is tangible, recent, and clearly requires significant shifts in operations, supply chains, maybe even consumer behavior. It's a real complex change scenario. These top responses then move to clearly define what these high-risk strategies actually are. We're mainly talking about two types: threats and manipulation.
Okay, threats seem obvious.
Yeah, like managers explicitly warning about job losses, pay cuts, or lost opportunities if employees don't adopt new systems or meet aggressive new targets.
And manipulation, that sounds sneakier.
It often is. It might involve withholding critical information, selectively presenting data to paint a misleadingly positive picture, or maybe distorting facts to push an agenda without full transparency or real consensus. The best analyses gave brief examples of how these might actually play out in the specific business context, making the definitions concrete.
But just defining them isn't enough for evaluation.
Not at all. Defining is step one. The real mastery was in the evaluation. These responses meticulously discuss the potential upsides first. They acknowledge that in certain situations, maybe urgent, critical ones, these strategies can yield fast results or ensure unquestioned compliance.
Like if the business is about to go under.
Exactly. If a business is facing an existential threat, drastic immediate measures might seem necessary for survival, even if they're tough or ethically borderline in other contexts. They can break through resistance quickly. However, and this is where the deep insight came in, they also meticulously outline the significant downsides. High potential for resistance from people feeling coerced. Severe, maybe lasting damage to organizational culture, fostering mistrust instead of collaboration. A profound loss of trust between management and staff.
And presumably longer-term effects, too.
Absolutely. They explored how these tactics can stifle innovation. People become afraid to speak up or take risks. They can lead to higher turnover of your best people, who often have other options and prefer psychologically safer workplaces. So as seeming effective short-term, these strategies can erode the long-term health and adaptability of the business. You might win the immediate battle for compliance, but lose the war for the organization's future vitality. They wove this complex argument together, weighing pros and cons, always linking back to the case study. And structurally, the best ones were clear. Intro, body paragraphs for definition application, and then evaluation, and a strong, nuanced conclusion.
It sounds like this question really tests more than just memorizing definitions.
Oh, much more. It's about critical thinking, ethical considerations in the broad sense of what's good for the organization long term, and applying theory to messy, real-world dilemmas. A frequent pitfall was failing to use a truly contemporary case study, using old or generic examples that lacked context and limited the evaluation. Another major issue was just describing the strategies without any real evaluation, no assessment of effectiveness, implications, or whether they were the best choice versus alternatives.
Just saying what they are, not whether they work or what the cost is.
Exactly. Some responses were just too general, lacking specifics from the case study or the strategies themselves. This type of question demands deep analysis, recognizing that while high-risk strategies can force change quickly, the hidden costs, human capital, trust, future adaptability are often immense. Often lower risk, more collaborative strategies, though maybe slower, lead to more sustainable, deeply embedded change. They foster ownership, not just compliance.
So for a big question like this, planning seems absolutely crucial.
Non-negotiable. Before you even start writing or speaking, sketch out a quick plan.
Okay, walk me through it.
First, your introduction. Introduce a relevant contemporary case study and the specific change it's undergoing. Second, body paragraph 1. Explain what high-risk strategies are, threats, manipulation. Give specific examples of how they could be used in this case study context, e.g., how threats might enforce a tight deadline for all these plastic reduction. Third, body paragraph 2. This is the core evaluation. Discuss the effectiveness. When might they be necessary? What are the immediate benefits? Speed, compliance. But then critically, what are the negative consequences? Trust, morale, culture, innovation, retention, the full picture. And finally, your conclusion. Provide a final, nuanced evaluation. Are these strategies always the only way? Could lower risk, more collaborative approaches also work, maybe even better long-term? This is where your critical thinking really has to shine, showing you can weigh complex factors and make a well-reasoned judgment. #outro.
Wow, what an eliminating journey through these real-world business dilemmas. It just really underscores how seemingly small details, whether it's absolute precision in a definition, those subtle nuances in communication styles, or recognizing the ripple effects of operational issues can have absolutely massive impacts in the complex, ever-evolving world of business. Learning from these kinds of case studies from both the successes and the stumbles truly offers an invaluable shortcut to sharpening your own understanding and intuition.
Absolutely. And if we distill everything we've explored today, there are a few foundational takeaways for anyone navigating the business landscape. First, the undeniable power of precision in language and definitions, whether it's understanding GBEs or distinguishing entitlements from transition support. Second, the paramount importance of truly grasping the why behind business operations and strategies, why KPIs move the way they do, or why service characteristics change how you manage things. Third, that critical skill of analytical thinking, connecting cause and effect, building logical chains, and really evaluating strategies, like we saw with absenteeism and high-risk change. And finally, the absolute necessity of linking theoretical concepts to real-world examples, making your understanding concrete, applicable, and ultimately actionable.
Couldn't agree more. After diving into how utterly crucial that precision and analytical thinking are, I want to leave you, our listener, with this thought. How much of what you think you know about the business world is based on maybe a surface-level understanding versus truly grasping the nuanced why behind it all? And what new insights might unlock for you? What might you gain by committing to digging just that little bit deeper next time you encounter a new business concept or a challenging situation? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.